Joker Folie Deux is being hated on by so many people. Not only have critics been unreceptive to the film, but audiences aren't super crazy about it either. It's sporting scores below 40% on Rotten Tomatoes and cinema score of a D+, which is the lowest of any comic book film to date. So I went into the film not really listening to negative statements made by many individuals. If you've seen my channel, you know that I never follow popular opinions and always create my own. This is my video essay on why Joker 2 is in fact a pretty terrible joke. The story. Joker Folie Deux finds Arthur Fleck institutionalized at Arkham awaiting trial for his crimes as the Joker. While struggling with his dual identity, Arthur not only stumbles upon true love, but also finds the music that's always been inside him. This synopsis has been provided by Rotten Tomatoes, and it sounds like a relatively simple story, but we'll get more in depth. There are spoilers in this video for if you have not seen the film, make sure you guys go watch that, or if you don't want to see the film and you guys just want to see a review on it, then you guys can stick around. This is the warning. Terrible joke. First Joker, when released, was considered controversial when released back in 2019. However, it felt like a refreshing and new take on the clown prince of crime that was needed. Elements of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy were used as heavy inspiration for the character and their interpretation of Gotham. It was so well received, it was the first R-rated film to join the $1 billion club. So it would come as no surprise that Warner Brothers would want to capitalize on the success of the first film and want a sequel, even though it was never really needed. I saw Joker 2 a couple of days ago and immediately left the theater with a reaction very similar to everyone who reviewed this film. I needed some time to kind of think about how I was going to express my feelings on this film that would make sense to my audience. Two words stuck in my head when I got out of this movie. It felt as if the film played a terrible joke on me and the audience. This film felt as if there was a ton of creative and interesting ideas that personally just didn't work for me the way that they intended. Or maybe it was exactly how they intended. I'll elaborate more in another category. Musical. When this film was announced to be a musical, many had expressed their concerns that this would ruin the film. I never went into this film disliking the fact that it would be a musical. I actually happen to really like musicals, and I think that if they had handled it correctly, it could have serviced the story in a unique way that no comic book movie before had done. It could have been an expansion on the dance sequences from the first film, but be more in depth with Arthur's mind and how he's comfortable diving into his own madness and terror. I genuinely felt heartbroken by the musical aspect of the film, since they only served in dragging out a film that could have been summed up in just 5 minutes. A good musical progresses the story instead of halting it. Even the singing in these sequences weren't really good from what I've seen, and it was an intentional choice from what I've read.
For once in my life, I have someone who needs me.
According to Todd Phillips, he wanted these characters to sound like average individuals singing, but it shouldn't really matter considering these sequences take place in Arthur Fleck's head anyways, so it doesn't really matter that he would sing like a professional, and it just dragged the film out to an agonizing beat. I was kind of miserable listening to these musical elements because not only did it halt the film, but it just sounded horrible. It sounded like a rake raking up against my ears. Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix reprises his role as Arthur Fleck, and it should come as no surprise that this guy does a fantastic job portraying the character, but the script doesn't service the character that he's playing as. The first film had completed Arthur Fleck's transformation into the Joker. It felt like an excellent conclusion to his character arc. This film completely neglects the development of the prior movie and sets Arthur back to being unconfident and not the Joker. He's only really the Joker in his dream sequences that are the musical moments, but for the most part, He stays in Arkham and the courtroom awaiting his trial of the death penalty. His character from beginning to end remains at the same low point throughout and really doesn't take what was established before and expand on it. That was a major disappointment, and I'll elaborate a little bit more in another category. Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga plays as Harley Quinn and does a solid job at playing this interpretation of the character. We're normally used to seeing the version who is manipulated into a life of crime with the Joker, but sometimes I don't mind different interpretations of iconic characters as long as they're handled right and stay somewhat true to the source material. This version is more in the dominant role and manipulates Arthur into being the Joker. In concept, this could work, but doesn't because Arthur's rock bottom 90% of the film, and this doesn't really add any story progression when watching by the end of the film. You could completely remove Lady Gaga from the movie and nothing would change. Also, the film underutilizes her to the point that I'd prefer to just go back to basics. Also, it's to mention that she does have a degree in psychology like her comic book counterpart, and she checked herself into Arkham to meet Arthur, but being an obsessed fangirl is far less interesting than being a good person being misguided into hurting others for someone else's benefit that she believes loves her.
Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy, get ready for the judgment day.
Also felt like a meta commentary on obsession and idolization of serial killers, and I could see what Todd Phillips might have been going for here, but for me it just was not as interesting as the original Harley Quinn concept from stories like Mad Love. Themes. One of my favorite sequences is the opening animation, and it had a unique style to it, but it also provides a theme for the rest of the film. The film presents a unique concept that the Joker's shadow overpowers Arthur Fleck. Arthur always wanted to be accepted, and he finds acceptance in chaos in being the Joker. Harley loves the imagination of the Joker, but not the man beneath the makeup. He finds the spotlight in Joker, but Arthur Fleck needs to die for his acceptance. When he says in the courtroom that he isn't the Joker, it's almost as if it points a finger at its audience, and this is for liking a deranged psychopath. We don't like Arthur, but we idolize the Joker. Boy, Todd Phillips must have thought he was cooking with this, huh? The ending. There are unique concepts and ideas throughout this film, but its execution is not well delivered. The biggest middle finger that Todd Phillips gives to Warner Brothers and the fans, undoubtedly, is the ending. Arthur is led into a hallway in Arkham by a corrupted guard, and an inmate that was in the background of the film wants to tell him a joke. After his joke, he prison shanks Arthur and causes him to bleed out on the floor, and in the background, the inmate carves a smile on his face, insinuating that Arthur was never the Joker, but this guy was the actual Joker. He was the Joker. That was the biggest slap in the face of fans I've seen in a comic book movie. It makes both movies entirely pointless and shows just how much Todd Phillips really didn't want to make this sequel.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
In conclusion, Joker 2 is full of many interesting, unique ideas, interesting commentaries of the idolization of serial killers through the Harley Quinn character, acceptance in the Arthur Fleck character, and many well-shot sequences, but as a follow-up to the first movie is a major disappointment. The entire film showed why the first movie should have stayed a one-off and not a whatever cash grab that this was. This film is entirely pointless. As I stated before, it's a 5-minute short extended to a 2-hour film that ends anticlimactically. Arthur starts off in prison, meets Harley, and then proceeds to go to trial. Plays up the Joker persona, then gets raped by prison guards, which, by the way, felt like it was just in terrible taste. Like, why'd they even throw that scene in the movie? Decides that being Joker just isn't worth it. gets turned back into Arkham and afterwards gets shanked to death. Why did we need a whole movie for him to go back to rock bottom and get shanked? Like, he starts off in prison and then ends off in prison and then dies. Warner Brothers could clearly just deserve some blame in this, but so does Todd Phillips, as I believe he never wanted to make this film to begin with. Let this movie's performance be a lesson to studios to give fans what they want instead of stepping on the toes of your fans and still expecting them to give you money. And to DC, it's when you make films like this that I just can't defend you.